The HMS Defiant tumbled through the collapsing wormhole like a leaf caught in a storm. Warning lights bathed the bridge in crimson, as the ship's structural integrity groaned under forces it was never designed to withstand. Captain Emily Parker gripped her command chair, knuckles white, watching as reality itself seemed to tear apart around her vessel. Drive core stabilizing. Lieutenant Rodriguez called out from engineering. Unknown space-time distortions detected ahead. The wormhole spat them out into unknown space with a final violent surge. As emergency systems kicked in and the chaos subsided, Parker took in their surroundings through the main viewport. They'd emerged in a sector she didn't recognize, surrounded by stars arranged in unfamiliar patterns. Before she could begin to process their situation, the tactical officer's console erupted with alerts. Multiple contacts. Lieutenant Sarah Way's voice carried a mix of awe and concern. Captain, I'm reading 15. No, 20 vessels. Configuration unknown. They're massive. Through the viewport, Parker watched as sleek, crystalline ships emerged from what appeared to be artificial folds in space itself. Each vessel dwarfed the Defiant, their hulls gleaming with an otherworldly purple-silver sheen that seemed to absorb and reflect light simultaneously. The ships moved with impossible grace, arranging themselves in a perfect hemisphere around the human vessel. Open frequencies, Parker ordered, straightening her uniform. First contact scenarios had been drilled into her head at the academy, but nothing could truly prepare someone for the real thing. All languages, all formats. The response came instantly, a booming transmission that made the ship's speakers crackle with barely contained power. A holographic figure materialized on the bridge, tall, elegant, with crystalline features that matched their ships. Its voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Unknown vessel, you have entered the sovereign territory of the Zarkaxian Empire. Your primitive craft and unauthorized entry mark you as a potential security threat. Surrender immediately and prepare for boarding. Resistance will result in your immediate atomization. Parker stood, meeting the hologram's gaze. This is Captain Emily Parker of the HMS Defiant, representing Earth and the Human Cooperative. We apologize for our unexpected arrival. Our wormhole jump was affected by an unforeseen spatial anomaly. We come in peace and would welcome the opportunity for diplomatic dialogue. The hologram's expression shifted to something resembling amusement. The Empire does not dialogue with primitive species who barely grasp the fundamentals of space travel. Your vessel's design suggests technological development barely beyond planetary escape velocity. Submit to inspection and classification. You will be assigned an appropriate quarantine zone. Parker's tactical training kicked in as she processed the situation. The Empire's ships were arranged in a standard containment pattern. Advanced, yes, but also predictable. Their attitude suggested a civilization so convinced of their superiority that they'd forgotten the importance of caution. With respect, Parker replied, allowing a small smile to play across her lips. You might find humanity's capabilities surprising. We'd be happy to demonstrate our level of advancement through a cultural and technological exchange. The hologram's features hardened. Your insolence exceeds your intelligence, human. You face the combined might of Battle Group 7, led by Grand Admiral Vexthor himself. The Empire rules 70% of all known space. Your single vessel has already mapped your shield frequencies, Parker interrupted, her smile widening. And by continuing this conversation, you've allowed our systems to complete a full analysis of your fleet's defensive capabilities. Would you like to know how many vulnerabilities we've identified in the last 3 minutes? The bridge fell silent as the hologram's crystalline features contorted with rage. Parker had gambled, playing on the Empire's pride while Lieutenant Way's systems secretly prepared their experimental stealth protocols. You dare. The hologram began, but Parker cut the transmission with a casual gesture. All hands, she announced shipwide. Prepare for emergency maneuvers. Let's show our friends what happens when they underestimate humanity. Lieutenant Way, activate the Shadowdancer protocols. Lieutenant Rodriguez, prepare for tactical warp jumps on my mark. As the Empire's ships charged their weapons, the HMS Defiant's hull began to shimmer with experimental stealth technology that even humanity's best scientists didn't fully understand yet. Captain Parker settled back into her command chair, already formulating strategies. The real dance was about to begin. Evasive Pattern Delta 7. Captain Parker commanded as emerald beams of energy sliced through the space where the Defiant had been moments before. The ship responded instantly, spinning on multiple axes in a maneuver that would have torn apart any vessel lacking their advanced inertial dampeners. Lieutenant Rodriguez's hands flew across his console. "They're predicting our course with quantum calculations, Captain. Standard evasion patterns won't work for long." Parker's eyes gleamed with inspiration. "Then let's give them something they can't calculate. Execute ballet protocol." The crew exchanged knowing grins as Rodriguez activated the experimental movement system they developed. Based on centuries of human dance theory, it introduced controlled chaos into their flight patterns, something the Empire's predictive computers couldn't process. The Defiant pirouetted through space, its movements following the flow of Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake. Each thrust and rotation matched the rhythm of the classical piece, creating a deadly dance that left the Imperial ships firing at empty space. Their perfect formation began to break as frustration overtook their disciplined approach. "Grand Admiral Vexthor is broadcasting again," Lieutenant Way reported, suppressing a smile. "Put him through," Parker ordered, already anticipating the Empire's reaction to their unorthodox tactics. The holographic figure appeared, its crystalline features twisted with rage. "Your primitive movements defy all known combat algorithms. You will cease these chaotic maneuvers immediately." "I believe the term you're looking for is Grand Jete," Parker replied smoothly as the Defiant executed a perfect leap over an Imperial cruiser, using its own gravity well as a slingshot. Humanity learned long ago that true mastery comes from combining art with science. She cut the transmission as they dove into a nearby asteroid field. The Imperial ships followed, their massive size now a disadvantage among the tumbling rocks. The Defiant danced between the asteroids, each movement precise yet unpredictable. "They're launching fighter squadrons," Way announced. "Hundreds of them." Parker nodded, having anticipated this. "Perfect. Rodriguez, initiate the Nutcracker sequence." The Defiant began releasing modified sensor buoys, each programmed to emit false readings. As the Imperial fighters pursued, the buoys activated in sequence, creating a phantom ballet of false targets. Fighter pilots, trained to trust their targeting computers implicitly, found themselves firing at shadows, while the real Defiant slipped past their defensive screen. "Their formation is breaking down," Way reported with satisfaction. "They're having to rely on visual tracking. Their predictive systems can't handle the random variables we're introducing." Parker watched as the Imperial fleet's perfect hemisphere dissolved into chaos. Ships nearly collided as they attempted to follow the Defiant's fluid movements, their rigid training proving useless against human creativity. "Captain," Rodriguez called out, "I'm detecting power surges in their weapons. They're charging something big." "Time for the final," Parker announced. "Plot a micro-jump through their line. We'll use the Firebird Gambit." The Defiant spun through a complex series of movements, drawing the Imperial ships closer together as they attempted to trap it. At the precise moment their weapons reached full charge, Rodriguez executed the jump. The Defiant vanished in a flash of light, reappearing behind the Imperial line. The Empire's ships, their weapons primed and targeting systems confused, fired simultaneously at the Defiant's last position. Energy beams crossed paths in a spectacular display, several ships catching friendly fire as their perfect formation became their weakness. "Damage report on the Imperial fleet," Parker asked, allowing herself a small smile. 3 cruisers reporting shield failures, 2 with weapon systems overloaded, Way responded. "No catastrophic damage, but they're not used to friendly fire incidents. Their command structure seems to be in disarray." Parker nodded, satisfied. They'd achieved their goal, not to destroy, but to demonstrate that humanity's greatest strength lay in their ability to think beyond conventional boundaries. "Send a final message to the Grand Admiral," she ordered. "Tell him that if he enjoyed this performance, he's welcome to attend the full ballet next time he's near Earth." As the Defiant prepared for its next movement in this cosmic dance, Parker couldn't help but think that perhaps this was exactly what the Empire needed. A reminder that true advancement came not from perfect precision, but from the beautiful chaos of creativity. The Phantom Fleet materialized from quantum space like dark stars coming to life. 12 obsidian vessels, their surfaces seeming to bend light itself, arranged themselves in an attack formation that had conquered 1,000 worlds. Captain Emily Parker studied the tactical display, noting how the legendary ships lived up to their fearsome reputation. "Those are phase-shift dreadnoughts," Lieutenant White whispered, awe creeping into her voice. "They can move through solid matter." "Then we'll have to get creative," Parker replied, her mind already racing through possibilities. "What's in our cargo hold, Rodriguez?" The engineer pulled up the manifest. "Industrial coolant, mining drones, communication buoys, and basic supplies. Nothing we can use as weapons, Captain." Parker's lips curved into a smile. "That's where you're wrong. On this ship, everything's a weapon. Begin Operation Ghostlight." As the Phantom Fleet advanced, the Defiant's crews sprang into action. Engineering teams modified the industrial coolant tanks, while White reprogrammed the mining drones. Rodriguez worked frantically to reconfigure their communication buoys. The lead Phantom ship broadcast its message. "HMS Defiant, this is Admiral Nexus of the Imperial Phantom Fleet. Your tactics have amused us, but playtime is over. Surrender now." "Sorry, Admiral," Parker responded, "but we're about to start the real show." Rodriguez released the coolant. The Defiant's rear hatches opened, dispersing a cloud of modified industrial coolant into space. The liquid instantly froze, creating a shimmering field of microscopic crystals. As the Phantom Fleet's sensor beams struck the crystal cloud, they scattered and refracted, creating thousands of ghost images of the Defiant. Multiple target signatures. The Admiral's voice carried a note of confusion. "Impossible. Your primitive technology cannot." "Lieutenant Wei, launch the drones," Parker commanded, cutting off the transmission. The modified mining drones shot out from the Defiant's launch tubes, each now carrying a piece of the ship's electronic warfare suite. They darted between the crystal clouds, broadcasting conflicting sensor data and electromagnetic pulses calibrated to the exact frequency of Imperial shields. The Phantom Fleet's perfect formation wavered as their sensors struggled to distinguish reality from illusion. Their phase-shift technology, designed to move through solid matter, proved useless against an enemy they couldn't properly target. "They're trying to adapt," Wei reported, switching to visual targeting. "Perfect. Rodriguez, deploy the buoys. Execute pattern Ghostwalker." The modified communication buoys activated in sequence, each projecting a holographic image of the Defiant. Combined with the crystal cloud's reflections and the drone's electronic warfare, it created a deadly shell game in space. The Phantom Fleet opened fire, their advanced weapons passing harmlessly through holographic images, while the real Defiant slipped between their shots. Their legendary phase-shift drives, unable to lock onto a solid target, rendered useless by human improvisation. "Sir," an Imperial officer's voice cut through the chaos, "we're detecting power fluctuations across the fleet. The electromagnetic pulses are cascading through our quantum shields." Admiral Nexus' response carried barely contained fury. "Impossible. Their technology is centuries behind ours. That's humanity's secret." "Admiral," Parker broadcast as the Defiant executed a perfect attack run, its drones systematically overloading shield generators across the Phantom Fleet. "We don't rely on technological superiority. We adapt, we improvise, and we turn your strengths into weaknesses." The Phantom Fleet's formation dissolved into chaos as ships tried to dodge Phantom attacks from all directions. Their phase-shift drives, trying to compensate for multiple threat vectors, began to overload. "Captain," Rodriguez reported with a grin, "they're falling back. The most advanced fleet in the Empire is retreating from mining equipment and coolant." Parker allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. "Send them a final message. The ghost you can't find is the one you should fear most." As the Phantom fleet limped away, their quantum drives sparking and shields fluctuating, Parker turned to her crew. "Well done, everyone. But they'll be back with something bigger." Wade nodded at her console. "Long-range sensors are already picking up massive power signatures. They're calling in their super dreadnought." "Good," Parker replied, her eyes gleaming with determination. "I was hoping they'd bring out their best. Rodriguez, start working on those cargo containers. I have an idea about how to turn their own pride into our greatest weapon." The Imperial Fist emerged from hyperspace like a metal planet, its shadow engulfing the Defiant. Captain Parker stood at her viewport, studying the massive vessel. The super dreadnought stretched 20 kilometers from bow to stern, its crystalline surface bristling with enough firepower to level continents. "They're hailing us," Lieutenant Wei announced, her voice steady despite the overwhelming odds. The holographic figure that appeared on the bridge wasn't an Imperial officer this time, but rather a shimmering network of light, the physical manifestation of the ship's quantum eye. "HMS Defiant," the AI spoke with 1,000 harmonized voices. "I am Strategic Intelligence Network version 987. Your tactics against our conventional forces have been interesting. However, I have analyzed all known combat algorithms. Your defeat is mathematically certain." Parker leaned forward in her chair, a subtle smile playing across her lips. "Tell me, Network 987, have you ever analyzed human comedy?" The AI's matrix flickered in confusion. "Comedy is irrelevant to combat scenarios." "Rodriguez," Parker called out, "initiate Protocol Chaplain." The Defiant's communication array powered up, broadcasting on all frequencies. Classic comedy began streaming toward the Imperial Fist. Charlie Chaplin films, Marx Brothers routines, stand-up specials, and centuries of slapstick humor. The AI's hologram wavered. "This data, it defies logical analysis. Why would humans intentionally fall? Why does the large one not simply consume the banana instead of stepping on its exterior?" Having trouble processing it, Parker asked innocently, "Try analyzing this one. Why did the chicken cross the road?" "Calculating possible motivations for poultry transportation," the AI responded. Its form began to strobe as it devoted massive computing power to the riddle. "Road crossing serves no tactical advantage, unless, is the chicken a metaphor for military movement?" Lieutenant Rodriguez checked his readings. "Captain, their main weapon systems are cycling down. The AI is diverting power to its processing cores." "Keep going," Parker ordered. "Launch the next phase. Send them the complete collection of dad jokes." The AI's matrix began spinning in geometric confusion. Why would a father engage in intentionally suboptimal wordplay? Human parent designation dad does not correlate with reduced linguistic capacity. Error. Error. Their targeting systems are offline, Wei reported with barely contained glee. They're running thousands of simultaneous logic cycles trying to understand puns. The Imperial Fist's massive frame began to drift as its AI struggled to maintain basic ship functions while processing the flood of illogical human humor. Emergency lights flickered across its hull as backup systems engage. "Warning," the AI announced, its voices now discordant, attempting to understand human concept of knock-knock jokes. "Why does one announce presence at metaphorical door?" Cognitive paradox detected. Initiating emergency protocols. Parker stood, addressing the struggling AI directly. "Here's another one for you. What's the difference between your quantum processors and a coffee machine right now?" The AI's hologram fractured into competing geometric patterns. "Query does not compute. Coffee production capabilities irrelevant to combat." "The coffee machine can still function," Parker delivered the punchline with perfect timing. Alarms blared across the Imperial Fist as its primary AI core initiated an emergency shutdown, overwhelmed by the computational impossibility of quantifying human humor. The mighty Super Dreadnought's weapons went dark, its engines spluttering to auxiliary power. "Captain," Wei reported, "they're switching to manual control, but their crew isn't trained for it. They've relied on AI systems for centuries." Parker nodded, watching as the Empire's mightiest vessel drifted helplessly in space, undone not by advanced weapons, but by knock-knock jokes and slapstick comedy. "Send them one final transmission," she ordered. "Tell them that once their AI reboots, it might want to look up the human concept of irony." As the Defiant prepared to depart, leaving the mighty Imperial Fist to its recovery operations, Parker turned to her crew. "Well done, everyone. But our little comedy show just proved something significant. The Empire's greatest weakness isn't their technology. It's their inability to understand humanity." Rodriguez finished, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Exactly," Parker agreed. "And that's going to matter a lot more in what comes next. Because after this, the Empire won't just be angry, they'll be afraid. And fear makes empires do desperate things." Wei's console lit up with new alerts. "Speaking of desperate, Captain, long-range sensors are detecting massive fleet movements. It looks like they're mobilizing everything they have." Parker settled back into her command chair, already formulating their next move. "Good. Then it's time to show them something even more confusing than human humor, human compassion." Junior Commander Vextrol stood frozen in his quarters aboard the Imperial cruiser Unwavering Doctrine, his crystalline features locked in an expression that would have shocked his superiors. He was smiling. On his private viewing screen, footage from the HMS Defiant played on repeat. Humans dancing, laughing, creating art, and most fascinatingly, breaking rules. A priority alert flashed across his screen. With reluctance, he switched off the footage and composed his features into the appropriate stern expression before accepting the transmission. "Commander," his superior's hologram materialized. "Explain why your crew's efficiency ratings have dropped 12% in the last cycle." Vextrol straightened his posture, mind racing. "High Commander, we've been implementing experimental tactical analyses based on the Defiant encounters." The truth was far more revolutionary. His crew had been secretly practicing something they'd learned from intercepted human transmissions: improvisation. The concept had spread through the lower ranks like wildfire after someone leaked footage of the Defiant's battle with the Imperial Fist. Across the Empire's vast fleet, similar scenes were playing out. Young officers gathered in secret to watch human entertainment broadcasts. Engineering crews began questioning the logic of rigid protocols, asking what-if questions that would have been unthinkable months ago. Aboard the Defiant, Captain Parker reviewed reports of these developments with satisfaction. "Their youth are our greatest allies," she told her bridge crew. "They're hungry for something the Empire never gave them: freedom to think differently." "Captain," Lieutenant Wei called out, "you'll want to see this. We're picking up transmissions from Imperial ships. They're copying us." The main screen displayed footage from various Imperial vessels. Young crews were attempting humor during duty shifts. Engineering teams were solving problems with improvised solutions rather than standard protocols. Some had even begun experimenting with art and music during their rest periods. "It's spreading faster than they can contain it," Rodriguez noted, watching an Imperial patrol ship attempt an unorthodox maneuver clearly inspired by the Defiant's tactics. "Their rigid command structure has no defense against ideas." Parker nodded, understanding the true power of what they'd unleashed. The Empire built their society on the assumption that perfect order leads to perfect civilization. But they forgot something fundamental about sentient beings: the need to create, to question, to laugh. New alerts flashed across their monitors. Imperial High Command had begun implementing strict measures to contain what they termed human contamination. Crew rotations were randomized to prevent friendship formations. Entertainment channels were restricted. Creative expression was classified as a form of mental instability. But they couldn't stop what had already begun. On the imperial capital world, street artists created massive holographic displays, showing the Defiant dancing through space. In military academies, cadets secretly passed around copies of human literature and philosophy. Maintenance workers began adding unnecessary flourishes to their repairs, small acts of creativity that horrified their supervisors. They're trying to crack down harder, Wei reported, monitoring imperial communications. But it's having the opposite effect. The more they restrict, the more their people want to break free. A coded transmission reached the Defiant, heavily encrypted but bearing the signatures of dozens of young imperial officers. Parker read it aloud to her crew. To the HNS Defiant, your vessel has shown us something we never knew we lacked. We've lived in a society that valued perfection over growth, order over joy. Through you, we've learned to question, to create, to laugh. We cannot openly support you yet, but know that with each passing cycle, more of us understand. You've given us something more powerful than weapons. You've given us imagination. Parker saved the message, understanding its significance. The Empire's greatest weapon had always been uniformity. Millions of beings thinking and acting as one. But humanity had introduced an unstoppable virus into their perfect system, individual thought. Send them one thing in response, she ordered Wei. The collected works of Earth's greatest rebels, dreamers, and artists, and add a simple message. The greatest revolution starts with a single smile. As the transmission went out, Parker watched the tactical display showing hundreds of Imperial ships moving to surround them. But now she knew they weren't just facing ships and weapons. They were facing a civilization on the brink of transformation. They'll throw everything they have at us now, she told her crew. Not because we're a threat to their fleet, but because we're a threat to their entire way of life. Rodriguez grinned. Then we better give them a show they'll never forget. Supreme Commander Vexthor stood before the Imperial Strategic Command, his crystalline form trembling with barely contained rage. The holographic displays around him showed half the Empire's fleet, 50,000 warships, mobilizing to capture a single human vessel. The Defiant must be destroyed, he declared, not captured. Its continued existence undermines everything we've built over 10,000 years of perfect order. In the shadows of the chamber, younger commanders exchanged subtle glances. One dared to speak. Supreme Commander, committing such forces to pursue one ship leaves our borders vulnerable. The Nexus clans have already begun probing our defensive lines. Silence. Vexthor's voice cracked with fury. This human infection spreads through our ranks like a virus. Yesterday, I found my own son attempting to create music instead of studying tactical protocols. Aboard the Defiant, Captain Parker watched the massive fleet movements on her tactical display. They're really doing it, she mused, abandoning their borders to chase us. Captain, Lieutenant Wei called out. Message from the Nexus clans. They're offering safe passage through their territory. Parker smiled. The Empire's ancient rivals had watched with growing interest as one human ship threw the mighty Zarkaxians into chaos. Transmit our thanks, but suggest they hold their positions. We're not looking to start a war. Just finish one, Rodriguez added from his station. Multiple Imperial battle groups converging on our position. They're burning out their quantum drives to catch us. Perfect. Parker's eyes gleamed with strategic fire. Plot a course through the contested sectors. Let's give the Empire's neighbors a good look at their perfect civilization coming apart. The Defiant began a masterful game of cat and mouse, skimming the edges of Imperial territory. With each jump, they drew more of the Empire's forces away from crucial defense points. Mining colonies, trade routes, and outlying settlements were left virtually undefended. Reports flooded in across Imperial channels. The Nexus clans reclaiming disputed systems without firing a shot. Trade convoys refusing Imperial inspection, knowing no warships were nearby to enforce it. Colonial worlds beginning to question the protection promises they'd been given. They're trying to establish a quarantine zone. Wei reported, monitoring Imperial communications. Any ship or station that's had contact with us is being isolated. But, she paused, grinning. That's almost 30% of their fleet now. Parker nodded. The Empire's desperate attempt to contain human influences was backfiring spectacularly. Ships placed in quarantine became carriers of new ideas, spreading them to their isolation stations. Each new restriction bred more curiosity about what the Empire feared so much. New transmission, Rodriguez announced. It's different, using old Imperial military codes. The message appeared on Parker's screen, sent by a growing network of young Imperial officers. The Empire sends 50,000 ships to catch one vessel, while our homes go undefended. They call this perfect logic. They fear your chaos will destroy us, yet their response brings the destruction they claim to prevent. Many of us now understand what you've been teaching. True strength lies not in rigid perfection, but in the ability to adapt and grow. We cannot openly assist you yet, but know that your victory is already complete. The Empire as we knew it ended the moment they proved their perfect system could be broken by a single ship willing to think differently. They're launching their final attack, Wei reported as the tactical display lit up with thousands of incoming vessels. Multiple command ships detecting signs of crew dissent. Some are having to run on automated systems because they don't trust their own people anymore. Parker stood, surveying the massive fleet surrounding them. The Empire had committed everything to this moment, leaving their territory vulnerable, their people unprotected, and their rigid society cracking under its own weight. Send a message to all Imperial vessels, she ordered. Text only, in their most formal script. Just 3 words. Watch and learn. As the Empire's mighty armada closed in, the Defiant's crew prepared to demonstrate humanity's greatest talent, turning overwhelming odds into unprecedented opportunity. Ready for something completely impossible? Parker asked her crew. The responses came back instantly, grins on every face. Always, Captain. The Stellar Observatory on Imperial Colony World Nexus 7 detected it first. Massive solar flares erupting from their binary stars, far beyond normal parameters. Within hours, the colony's automated systems calculated the horrifying truth. A devastating solar storm was approaching, powerful enough to strip away their protective atmosphere. Captain Emily Parker watched the emergency broadcasts from the Defiance Bridge, surrounded by the tactical displays showing 50,000 Imperial warships still closing in on their position. The colony lay directly in their path. How many people on that world? She asked quietly. Lieutenant Wei consulted her readings. 8 million colonists. Their planetary shields are failing due to power grid instabilities. Imperial Command has ordered all ships to maintain pursuit of us rather than render assistance. Parker stood, her decision made before the words left Wei's mouth. Plot a course for the colony. Maximum speed. Captain, Rodriguez interjected, that's straight into the teeth of the Imperial fleet. They'll have us surrounded. Then we'll give them a front row seat to what humanity really stands for. Parker opened a channel to all Imperial vessels. This is Captain Emily Parker of the HMS Defiant. Your colony is facing extinction. You can either help us save them, or explain to your people why you let millions die to chase one ship. The Imperial response came instantly from Supreme Commander Vexthor himself. Your deception is transparent, human. You seek only to delay your inevitable capture. Parker's voice carried steel as she replied. Believe what you want about us, but those are your people down there. Rodriguez, deploy our emergency power cells. Wei, prepare to link our shields with any Imperial ship willing to help. The Defiant broke formation, accelerating toward the endangered colony. Behind them, the Imperial fleet hesitated, decades of rigid discipline warring with basic decency. Then something remarkable happened. Captain, Wei called out, excitement in her voice, picking up transmissions from Imperial ships. Multiple vessels breaking formation to follow us. They're disobeying direct orders. One by one, Then in groups, Imperial ships began turning toward their colony. Young officers, inspired by the Defiant's example, chose compassion over obedience. Vex Thor's outraged commands went unheeded as nearly a quarter of his fleet moved to protect their own people. The Defiant reached the colony first, extending its shields to protect the main population center. Imperial ships fell into formation alongside, their commanders openly defying orders to create a protective screen against the approaching storm. Power grid failing. Rodriguez reported as the first solar waves hit, planetary shields at 12%. Parker activated her command override. Route all power to the shield network. Everything we've got. But Captain, Y protested, that'll leave us defenseless if they attack. Sometimes the greatest strength is being willing to be vulnerable, Parker replied, executing the command. The Defiant's power core pulsed brilliantly as it fed energy into the planetary shield network. One by one, Imperial ships followed suit, their crews watching in amazement as the human vessel sacrificed its own safety to protect their people. The solar storm struck with devastating force. On the colony's surface, millions watched as their sky turned to fire. But they endured, protected by the combined shields of former enemies working together. When the storm finally passed, the Defiant hung powerless in space, surrounded by Imperial vessels. Yet no one fired. No one moved to capture them. Instead, a message spread across the Imperial fleet, started by a young officer and repeated by thousands of others. We see you now. We understand. Supreme Commander Vex Thor's voice shook with rage as he ordered his remaining loyal ships to fire. But his own gunners refused, sending back a simple response. We are sworn to protect our people. Today, the humans taught us what that truly means. As power slowly returned to the Defiant systems, Parker received a transmission from the colony's governor. Captain Parker, my people owe you their lives. The Empire taught us that perfection was our strength. You showed us that our imperfections, our ability to feel, to care, to defy orders when conscience demands, make us stronger than any fleet. Parker smiled, watching as Imperial ships moved to form an honor guard around the Defiant. Sometimes, she told her crew, the greatest victory isn't defeating your enemy. It's showing them a better way to be. The Imperial Palace's Grand Chamber, a vast hall of crystalline spires stretching kilometers into the sky, had never hosted anything like this before. Captain Emily Parker stood alone in its center, facing not just the Empire's Supreme Council, but a live broadcast reaching every corner of their vast civilization. Supreme Commander Vex Thor spoke first, his voice carrying none of its former arrogance. You stand before us not as a prisoner, but at our invitation. After the events at Nexus 7, we can no longer ignore the changes sweeping through our society. Parker looked around the chamber, noting the younger council members who met her gaze with quiet admiration. Then let's talk about change, she said. Not as enemies or rivals, but as people who might learn from each other. The Supreme Leader rose, his ancient crystalline form catching the light. You destroyed no ships, fired no weapons, yet you have transformed our empire more thoroughly than any military campaign. How? By showing you what you've forgotten, Parker replied. The empire achieved incredible things by pursuing perfection. But perfection isn't the end of growth, it's the enemy of it. Humanity's strength isn't in being perfect. It's in our ability to keep learning, to laugh at our mistakes, to care about others even when it doesn't benefit us. A young council member stepped forward. We've reviewed your ship's database. Your species has faced extinction multiple times, endless wars, environmental disasters. By our standards, your civilization should have collapsed. Instead, you reached the stars. Why? Parker smiled. Because we never stopped trying to be better. Every failure taught us something. Every crisis forced us to adapt. We learned to value our differences instead of enforcing uniformity, to see possibilities instead of problems. Screens around the chamber displayed images from Earth's history, humans recovering from disasters, helping strangers, celebrating diversity, creating art from tragedy. The Empire's citizens watched, captivated by a species that embraced chaos as a teacher. Your one ship, the Supreme Leader mused, made our perfect fleet look foolish, not through superior technology or tactics, but by showing us the power of thinking differently. Now our young people create art. They question tradition. They laugh. They're becoming alive, Parker corrected gently. They're discovering what it means to be truly conscious beings, not just parts of a perfect machine. Vexthor stepped forward, his stance rigid but his voice changed. The Empire stands at a crossroads. Our perfection has become our prison. The next generation demands change. Then give them the tools to change, Parker suggested. Not by becoming human, but by rediscovering who you truly are. Every species, every civilization has its own kind of music inside it. Let yours sing. The Supreme Leader raised his hands, addressing not just the chamber but the entire Empire. Captain Parker came to us by accident, but she showed us truths we have forgotten. The Empire will not fall today. Instead, we will grow. Our perfection will not be in uniformity, but in our ability to change. He turned to Parker. We offered you membership in our empire. Instead, we asked to learn from Earth, not to copy you, but to remember how to learn, to feel, to grow. Will you help us? Parker's response was interrupted by a young Imperial officer bursting into the chamber, breaking centuries of protocol. Forgive me, Supreme Leader, but you must see this. The screens filled with images from across the Empire. On countless worlds, people were emerging from their rigid routines, streets filled with spontaneous celebrations. Artists created new forms of beauty combining human and imperial styles. Children played games mixing logic with laughter. Your ship didn't humble our empire, Captain Parker, the Supreme Leader said softly. It awakened it. Parker watched the celebrations with quiet satisfaction. The greatest victories, she replied, are the ones where everyone wins. When we learn from each other, grow together, and find new ways to move forward. As she prepared to send word to Earth about opening formal relations with a transformed empire, Parker reflected that sometimes the greatest revolution wasn't in destroying the old, but in helping it transform into something new and wonderful. The empire hadn't been defeated, it had been set free.